The fastest cars, the best drivers, the highest level of racing around the globe. You're listening to Talk F1 from the Michael Papinchak Show, where I discuss every race lap by lap from the Formula One season. Now buckle up, because it's time to Talk F1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Talk F1 from the Michael Papinchak Show. I am your host, Michael Papinchak. The summer break from Formula One is over with the 2022 Belgium Grand Prix. All right, so we are at Spa-Francorchamps. The first race at Spa was in 1950. This is a very historic track for Formula One. It is the longest track on the F1 circuit and has the highest elevation changes. Now, qualifying on Saturday was delayed because of the Porsche Super Cup. So as I've discussed before on Talk F1, not only does Formula One come to race at these tracks, but there are also usually support series that support Formula One. So you have F2, you have the W Series, which is an all-female racing series, and you have the Porsche Super Cup. There was a crash in the Porsche Super Cup, so the qualifying was delayed so they could rebuild one of the walls. It's nice, cool weather on this track for qualifying, but there are going to be some grid penalties. So there are rules and regulations that dictate how many power units and how many power unit components you get during a season. And if you exceed that limit, you get grid penalties. So already going into this race, we know that 6 drivers, no matter how they qualify, are going to be sent towards the back of the grid. And that is Valtteri Bottas for Alfa Romeo, the current world champion Max Verstappen for Red Bull, Charles Leclerc for Ferrari, Lando Norris for McLaren, Esteban Ocon for Alpine, Zhou Guanyu for Alfa Romeo, and Mick Schumacher for Haas. They all have extra power unit elements, which gives them grid penalties. So even if Leclerc or Verstappen or Norris, for that matter, should get pole during qualifying, they will not start on pole. They will be sent towards the back of the grid. Also, there's been a lot of news during the summer break. We did learn that Fernando Alonso will be leaving Alpine for Aston Martin next series, and Daniel Ricciardo will be let go of his contract from McLaren a year early. So Daniel Ricciardo announcing that he will not be racing for McLaren next season. So let's go to Q1. It's an 18-minute session. Right away, we can see that Mercedes kind of lacks pace, even though they did end the session P5 and P7. And it's really a Red Bull versus Ferrari, a Sainz versus Perez, because we know Max and Leclerc will be sent to the back of the grid, so all eyes are on Carlos Sainz for Ferrari and Sergio Perez for Red Bull. Eliminated in Q1 are Sebastian Vettel for Aston Martin, Nicholas Latifi for Williams, Kevin Magnussen for Haas, Yuki Tsunoda for AlphaTauri, and Valtteri Bottas for Alfa Romeo. Q2, we have a 15-minute session. Eliminated the bottom 5, Daniel Ricciardo for McLaren, Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri, Zhou Guanyu for Alfa Romeo, Lance Stroll for Aston Martin, and Mick Schumacher for Haas. And then fighting for pole in a 12-minute session in Q3, we have Verstappen, Sainz, Perez, Leclerc, Ocon, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Albon, and Norris. And like I said, even though Verstappen got pole, he will not be starting on pole. So even though Verstappen got to take the pictures as the pole sitter, got to sign, they sign like a small tire as the pole sitter, even though he got to do all of that kind of pomp and circumstance for being the fastest during qualifying, he will not be starting at the front of the grid. So the front of the grid will be Sainz and Perez. So let's go over that starting grid for Sunday's race at Spa-Francorchamps. Again, it's the longest track in Formula One. It's only 44 laps. And so the starting grid for the race is Sainz, Perez, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Albon, Ricciardo, Gasly, Stroll, Vettel, Latifi, Magnussen, Bottas, grid penalty, Verstappen, grid penalty. So instead of starting on pole, Verstappen starts P14. 15 is Leclerc, again, grid penalty. Ocon, grid penalty. Norris, grid penalty. Zhou, grid penalty. Mick Schumacher, grid penalty. And Yuki Tsunoda will be starting from the pit lane. Now, let's talk about the race. We had a very interesting start to this race, and I'm going to sum up the race in one phrase. Basically, Lewis Hamilton thought that if he went airborne, it could basically help him gain some positions in this race. But unfortunately, he forgot. It's not Mercedes, but Red Bull that gives you wings. So lap 1, Hamilton and Alonso. Hamilton is trying to overtake Fernando Alonso. Hamilton's rear wheel makes contact with Alonso's front wheel, and that contact leaps Hamilton in the air. Literally airborne. He lands, and then the team tells him to stop the car, and Hamilton right out of the gate DNFs right on lap 1. So let me read to you what Alonso had to say on team radio about Lewis Hamilton after this contact. This is Fernando Alonso. Yeah, what an idiot. Closing the door from the outside. I mean, we had a mega start, but this guy only knows how to drive and start in first. So, whatever you want to say about Mr. Lewis Hamilton, it has always been this criticism that he's never really had a bad car. In his first season ever in Formula One, this was a guy who was already winning races. And Alonso basically saying that the only reason why Hamilton has these championships and has all this success is because he always starts at the front of the grid. He never really has to fight for positions. He never really has to, quote, race, if you know what I mean. He just gets out front, leads every lap, and sails on to victory and gets to, hold the trophy not only at the end of the races, but at the end of the season. Now, usually if a driver DNFs early in the race, he will be interviewed during the race, and they'll air that interview at some point. And so later in the race, they did air Lewis Hamilton's interview. Basically, Lewis, what happened out there? This is your first non-finish of the season. And then as soon as the person who was interviewing him brought up Alonso's comments, Hamilton immediately just brushed it off. Just said it doesn't matter what he said. And it's either because, in the heat of the moment, you're going 100 miles per hour, you say something over the radio, you may or may not mean it, or it could be maybe what you actually believe. Maybe Lewis Hamilton is kind of embarrassed by the fact that maybe that's true. Or maybe he's like, don't worry about what Alonso says. I'm a 7-time world champion. He only has 2. I'm Sir Lewis Hamilton. But it was very interesting. Alonso, calls it as he sees it, I guess. And I don't disagree. Listen, I am not a Lewis Hamilton fan by any means. I am a self-proclaimed Max Verstappen fan, Red Bull fan. We all know that here, okay? Lewis Hamilton, it's like Tom Brady. I don't like Tom Brady, but and the New England Patriots, but you have to acknowledge their dominance. Okay, were they cheaters? Maybe, maybe not. Whatever. I'm not going to get into all that. But, Tom Brady is probably the best, going to go down in history as probably the best quarterback ever if you just look at Super Bowls and stats and all of that stuff. And so, same with Lewis Hamilton. I mean, you can't deny his talent. Has he had it easy? I don't know if he's had it easy per se. He still needs to win the races and all of that stuff. He can't spin out and crash and all of that. So, whatever you think about Lewis Hamilton, if you didn't watch the race, watch that first lap. Watch him go airborne, listen to Alonso's radio, then listen to that interview Lewis gave where he did not want to hear it. I'm sure he knew what Alonso said. Maybe he didn't know what Alonso said. Regardless, it's over the radio. You hear a lot of times what an idiot, the drivers, when they crash, they'll go, what's that idiot doing? He doesn't know how to drive. You're going 100 miles per hour. You're all revved up literally and figuratively. So that was the big lap 1 incident. Often in Formula One, we have a lap 1 incident. Just the cars are all bunched up. They're close together. They're trying to gain position. And here it was Hamilton versus Alonso in a little Hamilton airborne. Okay, lap 2, we already have Verstappen up to P8 from P14. Leclerc is now P10 from P15, and Leclerc does have the fastest lap. Now, Latifi did spin, which caused Bottas to spin, and which ended up Bottas DNFing, and then they call out a safety car. Now, it was very hard to see if Latifi actually hit Bottas or if Bottas was just kind of getting out of the way. To me, it looked like Bottas was trying to avoid a collision, which caused him to beach into the gravel. So this track has gravel and also grass, but at this point in the track, there was gravel, and, you know, kind of once an F1 car gets in that gravel, those wheels spin, and there's really no way out. But Latifi did continue with the race, but this did pull out a safety car. So during the safety car, a Leclerc pitted, and Latifi pitted for a new front wing. On lap 5, the safety car ends. Verstappen was P7, but now up to P6 as he overtook Daniel Ricciardo. And Leclerc, because he pitted, is down in P17. So I'm basically, because of these grid penalties, you know, there's a lot of overtaking in the midfield, a lot of that. But really, we're going to be tracking the people who are fighting for the championship, which is, you know, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. So right away in the beginning, we got Leclerc started P15. Now he's down in P17. And it's like, oh my gosh, can Ferrari even catch up to the Red Bulls and the other Ferrari, Sainz, who's up top? At lap 7, Verstappen's now P5. He is 6 seconds off of the lead, and then he goes to P4 by overtaking Alonso, and Leclerc is now P16. Basically, by lap 7 of 44, Verstappen has pretty much already overcome the engine penalty. By lap 8, Verstappen overtakes Russell for P3, so by lap 8, he is already in a podium position. We have Sainz in first, or Sainz running first, Perez running second, Verstappen running third, with Leclerc down in P15. Lap 9, Verstappen takes over for the fastest lap, and Leclerc is P14, but Verstappen hasn't pitted yet. So, you know, even though Verstappen's on the move here, fastest lap, podium position, Leclerc's already pitted, but Max Verstappen has not. By lap 10, we're hearing a lot about degradation. You know, this is when the tires are wearing out, they are degrading, and oftentimes Pirelli, who produces the tires for Formula One, and the teams have an idea that the soft tire could go, let's say, 25 laps. I'm making that up. Let's just say they can go a certain amount of laps. Well, if it's too hot, too cold, too whatever, you know, especially here, too hot, it can change those numbers, or maybe those estimates weren't accurate. So the degradation is a problem throughout this race, and by P10, Leclerc is P11, knocking on the door of points positions. By lap 12, Sainz pits and comes out P6, and Verstappen wants to pass Perez, and so basically at this point, Max must have had his Red Bull before the race, because he is on such a move here. He is on such a mission that even as he approaches his teammate, he is telling his team, you got to get Perez out of the way. And under his own power, Verstappen, with probably the use of DRS, Verstappen does overtake Perez for the P1 position. And it didn't look like team orders. It looked like he just legitimately passed him, and which is probably the better way to do it. So if you don't know what team orders is, basically it's when a team, this was very famous between Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas when they raced together at Mercedes. The team would talk to Bottas and say, let Hamilton pass. You know, they're on different strategies, different places in the championship. You know, at the end of the day, even if Perez is winning, if Max is behind him for just championship points, they will often say, Sergio, let Max through. But it looked like Verstappen actually just passed him under his own power and not under team orders. By lap 15, Perez pits, 2.2 second pit stop, which is fantastic. That is a great pit stop. So we have larger wheels and tires this season, and there was a lot of talk. They're heavier. Is it going to be harder to do pit stops, or actually harder, but just slower because how heavy they are? But we can see that Red Bull, who usually has the fastest pit stops during the season, has gotten their pit stop well below 3 seconds and a very wonderful 2.2 second pit stop. And they wanted Verstappen to pit, I think, but Verstappen wanted to extend his stint. I think he just wants to keep going, keep getting further and further and further ahead. So a lap 15 check-in, we have Verstappen in the lead, followed by Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, now up in P4, and then George Russell for Mercedes, holding in P5. By lap 16, Verstappen does pit 2.8 seconds for medium tires, and he comes out P2 behind now P1 Carlos Sainz for Ferrari. Russell does overtake Leclerc for P4. Lap 18, Verstappen overtakes Sainz for P1, and Verstappen maintains the fastest lap. By lap 21, Perez overtakes Sainz for P2, and we have Verstappen leading, followed by Perez, followed by Sainz, and then Russell, and then Leclerc. By lap 26, Sainz pits for hard tires, comes out P4. Leclerc pits for medium tires, comes out P7. So at lap 26, Ferrari double stacks. Lap 28, Perez pits for hard tires and comes out P3. By lap 30, we have Verstappen leading, followed by Perez, Sainz, Russell, Vettel, and Leclerc. At lap 31, Verstappen pits, a nice 2.3 second stop. He comes out still in P1. He's on medium tires, and it's because he was plus 21 seconds ahead of Perez, who was in P2. So with 10 laps to go, we have Verstappen leading Perez, leading Sainz, leading Russell, and leading Leclerc. Let's go to lap 40. Verstappen now in P1 has the fastest lap. He is plus 16.7 seconds ahead of Perez, who's in P2. I want to remind you guys, just for perspective, this is a guy who got pole, but this is how fast he is. This is how amazing my boy Max Verstappen is doing this season. He got pole, had an engine penalty that put him at P14, and he says, no problem, by lap 40, I'm not only going to be in P1, I'm not only going to have the fastest lap, but I'm going to be 16.7 seconds ahead of whoever is in P2. In this instance, it's his teammate, Sergio Perez. Lap 41, he's now plus 17.3 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez in P2. By the next lap, lap 42, he's 17.7 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez in P2. By lap 43, he's 18.2 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez in P2. Not slowing down, no matter how far ahead he is showing, I am the champion. I am Max Verstappen. And I drink Red Bull, and it gives me wings. And at this point in the race, the commentators state that Lewis Hamilton was given a warning by the stewards for not going to the medical center after his crash. So when you have a crash, when you have contact that causes a DNF of any kind, you got to go to the medical center to get checked out. But of course, Hamilton, being Sir Lewis Hamilton, rules don't apply to me. I'm Lewis Hamilton. I don't have to go to the medical center. Come on, buddy. You're still an F1 driver, just like P20 Nicholas Latifi and Mick Schumacher, who crashes and cuts his car in half. You put your pants on just like the rest of us. So go to the medical center. Follow the rules. Come on. I hate that stuff. But whatever. It is what it is. So, lap 43, Leclerc pits for soft tires. Basically, he's trying to go for the fastest lap to steal that point away from Max. He does come out P6 behind Alonso. I totally understand this whole concept. You know, every point counts. The season's not over. Anything could happen. And if they didn't pit Leclerc to try for that fastest lap, then and they lose by 1 point, they go back in their heads and, oh, if we only pitted for that fastest lap, So if they knew Leclerc was only going to finish P5. So, all right, we're not going to win, okay? So we're not going to get the full 25 points for winning. Let's try to steal from Max that 1 point for fastest lap, because you never know at the end of the race if you're going to win the championship by 50 points or if you win by maybe a half a point, because you never know when a race doesn't go as long as it should because of weather. You only get half points, or you know what I mean? You just never know. So I understand their philosophy behind pitting Leclerc late for soft tires to hopefully get that fastest lap. Okay, lap 44, Leclerc does overtake Alonso for P5. There was a yellow flag in Sector 1, but it didn't really matter. The race ended. So let's go to the result. My buddy, my man, the one and only, the current world champion, Max Verstappen from P14 wins this race. His 9th win of the season. He also gets driver of the day. He also gets fastest lap, and he won this race 17.8 seconds ahead of P2 Sergio Perez, his teammate. And Ferrari with Carlos Sainz. Sainz, who sat on pole, did get on the podium with a P3. Guys, Ferrari has a lot of very, very, very questionable strategic plans. I think they should fire everyone on the pit wall. They have a great car. They have 2 great drivers. But who's ever doing the strategy, who's ever on that pit wall running the show, at one point they asked Leclerc what he wanted to do. Leclerc's like, you tell me what to do. I'm going 110 miles per hour. You tell me. You're the guys on the pit wall. You got to understand something. Drivers don't know what's going on. They don't have a little TV screen in there. They don't know where everyone else is at all times. They're racing their race. They're racing their strategy. They have plan A, plan B, plan C. I forget which team. I should have written this down. One of the teams was like, we're thinking plan G. Plan G? You mean your plan A, B, C, D, E, F didn't work out? You have to go all the way to plan G? Like, holy heck, is that how horrible I can't believe they even planned for a plan G. That's incredible to me. But anyway, Ferrari, fire them all. Fire the whole pit wall. I'm not talking about the engineers and the people who do, change tires and wings. I'm talking about your team principal, your strategy people. Fire them all, start over, because you're screwing up. You have one of the best cars, maybe the best car, even over the Red Bull, maybe the best car on the track, but your strategy is screwing you up. So P4 is Russell, P5 is Alonso, P6 is Leclerc. Again, he started, where did he start? He started P15, okay? So even though he did finish the race, this is really kind of ironic, was he fast in the race? Maybe, but unfortunately, he was too fast in the pit lane, and they gave him a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So he was like, oh, wow, he wasn't that fast in the race. Well, he was fast in the pit lane. So even though he finished ahead of Alonso, he did get a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane, which put him down to P6. And then Ocon, Vettel, Gasly, Albon, Stroll, Norris. Norris did have a penalty. He started, P17, only finished P12. I really feel bad for Norris. I think he's a phenomenal driver. I don't know if I feel bad. It's just he's a phenomenal driver, and he really deserves a phenomenal car. And he has been on the podium, and he's someone who I hope in the future is not only winning races, but gets himself at least one championship. I do like Lando. P13, Tsunoda, and then Zhou, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Schumacher, and Latifi. And then again, we have Bottas as a DNF and Lewis Hamilton as a DNF, former teammates. And our boy Nicholas Latifi from Williams, always in the back of the bus. So here's the deal. I loved this Grand Prix. I missed Formula One the past few weeks, so much so that as an American, I started watching Premier League soccer. Okay? I was scrolling through the Peacock app from NBC, looking for something to watch, feeling so lost that we did not have Formula One that I saw, Premier League soccer, and I looked it up. Premier League soccer is the most watched sport in the world. Okay, they estimate that over 4 billion people watch Premier League soccer out of the United Kingdom. And I thought, you know what? As an American, we obviously, we call it soccer, they call it football, because we have our own football over here in the United States. And I thought, I'm going to give football a chance. And I don't know any of the teams. I mean, I know the names, not all of them, but you hear Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Crystal Palace. Now, I never heard of Crystal Palace before, but that one popped into my head. Tottenham Hotspur, the Spurs. And so I went in with an open mind. I started watching it, and, I didn't understand stoppage time at first. Now I get it. They're running around. They never score. And I love Tottenham Hotspur. They scored like 4 goals in their first game, and obviously Man City's like the big, even though Man United was like the Yankees, you know what I mean? They were always winning. Now Man City, which is more like the Mets, like the other team in Manchester. Man City now, I don't know all the details, but apparently some guy bought the team and just bought all the best players. I'm not sure, but they're winning all the time. I wanted Tottenham to be my team, and then as a Beatles fan, I thought, okay, maybe Liverpool. Then, okay, I kind of like Arsenal, but then Man City is just so good. I think they're my team. But anyway, I was so missing Formula One over the summer break, I started watching Premier League soccer. I think I missed hearing like British, commentators with like British accents as you get with Formula One. But this was a great return to Formula One for me as a Max Verstappen fan. This guy, it's like butter. It's like cutting through butter. He just cuts through the field, calm, cool, collected. I start P14, not a problem. I'm not only going to get on the podium for you guys, I'm going to win the race. And I'm going to make sure my teammate is in P2. Like, it's unbelievable. But I got to tell you, though, if Ferrari knew how to strategically put a race together, maybe they'd be winning more. Maybe Sainz, who was on pole, would have won the race. Maybe Leclerc, who was starting back in P15, would have actually been somewhere to get more points or on the podium. But they just don't have their shit together, for lack of a better phrase. And it's unfortunate. But I was a huge fan of the Belgian Grand Prix. Please let me know what you think. If you have a chance when you're listening to like, share, subscribe, comment. You can find my podcast at tmpspodcast.com, where you'll see my regular podcast, F1 content, watch content, all kind of other good stuff. Guys, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't, download the F1 TV app. Buy it. It's only, I think, $80. It's the only way to watch F1. Don't worry about watching it on TV. Get it on your tablet, on your computer. There's different ways to watch. You can watch all the free practices, all the qualifying, all the races. I did not watch this race live. I just watched it here in the afternoon in the United States. It was on, I think, at 9 a.m. It's Sunday here in the U.S. I wanted to sleep in. So I get to watch it, and I don't have to worry about DVRing it or anything. And even if I go in the middle of the race, I can watch from the beginning. So I can just select watch live or watch from the beginning. It is fantastic. Definitely get the F1 TV app. Again, go to tmpspodcast.com. Thank you for listening to Talk F1 from the Michael Papinchak Show. Again, I am Michael Papinchak, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Michael Papinchak Show. Please go to tmpspodcast.com, where you'll find links to iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe.